Alright, folks. Welcome back, everyone. 皆さん、おかえりなさい。今日は160日目です。It is day 160. Get into our grammar reviews here. Okay. 来週までに漢字を30字30字30字覚える in advance ではいけない have to in advance. Okay. I didn't realize this was a separate point. Interesting. 教えない。教えない。Yeah. 教えなくて、教えなくてはいけない。No? I have to in advance. Oh. Maybe you need to put in MAKU? In advance. Hmm. Yeah. That how the in advance works? I didn't realize you can put it in between. Or did I mess up and boy? Oh, is it? No. Okay, I do need advance. So, how would you? You would have to combine. Hmm. The uh. Uh.
来週までに漢字を30字覚えておかなくてはいけない。
So we just add oku and negate oku. So okunakute ikenai. I can understand the parts now. Good. このいいか何このfilthiness. Nice. Guessing that's a yeah. So
何この汚さ。早く掃除をしてください。
早く掃除をしてください。A calf. No, 子牛。は生まれた。After or heck birth. と、ここから、interesting, 耳。formal conjunctive. Anadu? And then knuckle. And nice. So they conjugated the ending of this. Wait. Oh.
子
Wrong
牛は生ま
verb.
れた直後から耳が聞こえるが、子猫は聞こえない。
Oh, wrong verb. 寿司以外に何を食べたい？
寿司以外に何を食べたい？
一緒。勉強。want you to study me. 欲しいです。Or do we do like no. There's a I want to. I thought that it could just be a Thai thing. No, I thought it was like stay. Oh, I don't need a particle. Yeah.
一緒に勉強してほしいです。
Yeah, I don't need a particle. 最近は彼のことを I haven't interesting 考えていない考えてvery much haven't I haven't no probably
最近は彼のことをあまり考えていない。
考えて日本に行くって言ったのに留守行けない？
日本に行くって言ったのに結局行かない。
Oh no, 結局 that's not even close. I was thinking 結局That's結局 after all that's hard. That's tough. Can I highlight this? No. That's tough. After all, in the end, ultimately. So let's just tie or bound or contract. It is bureau office. Oh, it could be conclusion. Okay. この週末は雪がいっぱい、いっぱい降るからスキーをしに、I think I will go. きっともう、きっと、oh, interesting. Maybe it's, uh, I, I, I use the stem. Yo, no. Oh, no. It's, planning. So, 行こうよと思う. What? Oh, oh, check my spelling. Oh,
この週末は雪がいっぱい降るからスキーをしに行こうと思う。
I keep forgetting to hit the O twice. Like I type to and then just assume that there would be two O's there when I'm saying it. 彼は何年間も勉強したから漢字まで出る。
彼は何年間も勉強したから漢字まで書ける。
で、僕の家にはリビングがなかったので、家を建てる。rebuild. 建て、建てて、maybe? And then now しました。Maybe it's just 建て。
僕の家にはリビングがなかったので家を建て直しました。
建て直しました。So stem to link up with now. Or oh no, wait. Just kidding. Yes. Yes. Is it just stem? Dang it. I really thought it would line up with MAKU. Okay. Alright. 今夜の花火は綺麗。Hope satisfying. Oh, I hope for the na. That's indicating the satisfactory outcome. Type of hope. Not prayer. Is it prayer? I don't think. Probably like oh no nah uh
今夜の花火は綺麗だといいな。
綺麗だといい。そのコーヒーを好き。そのコーヒーを好き。である。うん。この読み物も 絶対いいじゃないでしょ。これ、絶対じゃないでしょ。である。I know, I'm pretty sure. Okay, so that's just dislike. Or do not like. And de areba. Or something like that. Could you try answering using a negative conjugation? Oh. Can't do it that way? Wait. Oh, no, wait. Hold. I was gonna use like the Tay form. Hypothetical. Hmm. Or do I just use? Are they talking about just negating the ba? How do I do that? Like, da, nai. How do I? Okay, hold up. So if it's this, right, then I would do re. Then that become do. So nai, and then nai. That doesn't make. Uh, wait, does that? Oh no, wait. It's de and then guess we do da right? And then there's something that links it. Kereba? Uh, not kereba. Hmm. That's an aru. Oh, wait, no, that's right. Okay. They don't want me to do it that way. I'm assuming. So, hmm. What's another if statement? I don't see how any other way I could do this. So I guess if I had to assume I'm conjugating this incorrectly. That's an aru. I'm checking my conjugation. I have no idea. Yeah, I have no idea. It's what I think it is. Oh, no. No, because they don't really they fail to demonstrate the negative form. So, or they fail to, in my opinion, they fail to explain the negative conjugation. Yeah. Areba. Oh, is that how that works? It just says the nai, and then you're just adding back. Unless I don't understand the aru. De na. What? Is it special? So is that aru?
そのコーヒーを好きでなければこの飲み物も絶対好きじゃないでしょう。
Am I crazy? Or iru and iru? Oh no, wait, what? Hang on. Aru is okay. It's the formal B, right? So I guess it's just special. I really, it's irregular. Oh, it's either I know it or I don't, and I don't. Actually, it's not part of my. So that's just straight up. You either know it. Okay. Can't be helped. Yeah, that's a regular. They didn't list the irregulars either. At least I don't. I'm pretty confident they did not list the irregulars for. Find out. Actually, I don't even know what entry it is. Maybe it's. Oh, pseudo is too basic. And only has Nasaru and. Oh, wait, we can look up probably Aru related or exist related. No, it'll take me too long to figure it out. But it's irregular. So there's really no way other than I would try separate things and assume that it's irregular. Okay. 今週末は映画 I'm 90. Yeah, okay. I'm like 80% positive. Dearu was not written anywhere as an irregular. And we have not crossed the vocabulary yet for that. So no. Now I know. Or something. 見に行けませんか? No? でも。
今週末は映画でも見に行きませんか？
なんか、お客さんはバス、バスなどできます。
お客さんはバスなどで来ます。
法律をwait, to renew oh, like 新ししてほしい。Oh no, it's just 新しI think. Oh wait, how do I? Uh-oh. I thought you dropped the E, right? And thenく正しく What? Oh, 正しく I have oh I'm misspelling. What? Oh, okay, they do. I missed a syllable. I missed the kana the whole time. Huh. Thought I could make new. Maybe like atara de or atara shiteしてほしい。
法律を新しくしてほしい。
新しくしてほしい。I kept skipping ra the whole time. Adequate. Okay. No. 文化会の準備をしている生徒an extent でいいからwhat? Oh no, this goes in 午前中までには終われせて finish 終われせておいて said wait おいて oh like can you finish because of sete and then this is a thought Wait. Yeah, advance. Finishing advance. So potential finishing. Okay. Oh, yeah, okay, okay. For the finishing, using the finishing part. 置いて。Mostly? Adequately. uh... What's mostly? Not... Okay. Oh... Hmm... That's me. That's quite... Hotondo can be... Right? Oh, no. Hotondo means most all or almost all when referring to a quantity. Okay, we are looking for an adverb for the most part. Roughly. Like... like... 大体
文化祭の準備をしている生徒。大体でいいから午前中までには終わらせておいて。
この旅館には日本各 maybe 何各 speech. That's interesting. But yeah, 各地から that might work.
この旅館には日本各地からお客様が来る。
Oh, お客様. Oh, yeah, just sama.彼女はいつもpositive. What? 前向き. Okay, 前向き. Interesting. Positively? I guess, like forward facing? Or before facing. 前向き positively, so I guess we're just gonna make it into a wait. Inflection, yeah, turning it into an adverb. Is that... I think... noni? No, not no. Some sort of... right? Or is it... Sure it was... oh, I need... Wait. This is key. What do I do with key? Nani? 前向き何? What kind of ending is that? Wait. What do I do with non-adjective? Oh, no, wait. Yeah, what do I do with non-adjective? We might just add the... Wait, I thought that would work. Like... Wait, am I misspelling it? Yeah. Just me.
彼女はいつも前向きに考える。
I might have skipped a syllable. I might have skipped a kana somewhere. You know, Yona onna no hito wa inai.
君のような女の人はいない。
Okay. Well, all right. So definitely today was the crown definitely goes to Yaru being irregular. And then second would be, well, that's kind of a combination because the Dearu was also the if and then situation. It was something else. There was something else. Toamo. What was the Toamo one? Still a couple like stem weakness versus K form. So the adverbial in for na adjectives do not require any additional ending. Toyi is a little slow in the mix. And then the difference between oku uses the te form, and naosu is linked to the stem. Hoshi is hoshi when you want like if you want someone to do something, it's linked to the te form. When you want something to be like in the need of, you want something, is using the subject marker. That was a 50. Those are 50/50s from today. I keep writing C in place of here, so I gotta pay attention to that. Sometimes when they say they're seeing something, I would type hearing, and then sometimes when they say hearing, I would type seeing instead. Being too laxed, too complacent about that. Yoni. There was a yoni somewhere. There are so many yoni points. Just taking a look. We're getting there. A lot more is picking up all the exceptions now. A lot of the stuff that are sticking for a while is not necessarily what the grammar point is about, but more so picking up all the irregulars. There are far more exceptions. It feels like exceptions just rule my current output. It's very different reading. Reading is very comfortable. Even translational is pretty comfortable. Trying to come up with the stuff when it's irregular or exception is pretty rough. Oh, it's the yoni combined with te hoshi, which you can break it up into two things combined. Grammar does have that wonderful joy of you can still break things up. Yesterday I encountered a piece that I still don't know why it does that yet. So hopefully I am able to cover that. All right. Definitely Dearu is interesting. I wonder if they have a point for dearu. They do. It's an N3 lesson. One more literal dot. Yeah, it's an N3 lesson. Let's see, dearu or dearimasu. Okay, so it is an aru. So then I can treat it like an irregular aru, which would be nai. I see. So that would be the inference that I should have made. I was on the fence, like 50-50. Oh, hey, there's a toggle. Oh, is this new? Oh. I don't remember seeing that before. Neat. I swear I haven't seen this thing. Obviously, I'm not going to tackle the Japanese here. Oh, wait, maybe it's N3 and on. Hold up. Let's click on a lower. I need a... So we're not going to get to this point FR. Well, I'll just keep in mind that it's aru. It's a combination of de and aru. At least that's how I'm going to remember it. Hang on. Well, let's go to like a N4. Oh, okay. So when it gets to N3, when they it's more about getting to N3. Oh, or maybe let's click on another N3 thing. Yeah. So it's when you get to N3 is when you can choose to toggle. There's no way. Yeah, reading these English words that I see here in Japanese, there's absolutely no way. You can probably infer some things, but holy, it would take a very long time. Yeah, man, that would take a very long time. Reading technical things, like to me, this is technical. That would be way too difficult at the moment. But it's kind of neat that they have a toggle. Spoilers, I suppose. All right, that's a wrap for Bunpro. Just gonna keep on the grammar train. Gotta end a little bit early. Tomorrow is yet again another Wanikani lesson day. It seems like I don't have that much time at the moment to really dive into the vocabulary. Not to say that I don't review vocabulary when I'm not like on here doing Bunpro and stuff. Get vocabulary elsewhere. I think our vocabulary is maybe, what is it now? About like 10,000 words, I would say, overall. 10,000 vocabulary words. However you qualify a vocabulary thing. Like, because technically, it's more than that. If you know, like, let's say roughly, 7,000 from Wanikani, right? Those verbs, like different verbs, different grammar sets, like when you combine the grammar set with the base like words that you have, you technically have like 30 to 40% more, because words are also phrases. When you combine like a verb, like two verbs in different grammatical structure, that is usually conceptually a word quite often, because they're used so often together. So technically, if you know like 7,000, you probably know 10,000. Not that you'll pick them up as in from memory, but you'll pick them up by reading them together. Like, oh, okay, well, that's got to mean this because it's a grammar point and two separate words put together. Even with that, I'm saying 10,000 because I've probably seen at least 10,000 words that fairly comfortable with at least 80 to 90% of them. And when I mean comfortable, more so that when you read it, you understand what they're trying to say, but not in English. Like, it's actually, some of them you don't really at least I don't really translate them when I'm reading Japanese. I feel them, right? Like, you read it and you're like, okay, well, I can picture something in my head. I'm not like saying, oh, this word means this and this in English. Like, in the evening, I don't do that anymore. Like, I rarely do that. I read for purpose. So oftentimes it could be like that grammar point that we were doing. When you turn on Japanese, I would be reading for a purpose in the evenings. I don't read for the idea of translating, doing grammar work, and extracting, which I think my impression is others do that. They watch manga and they read manga and watch anime, and then they're going to like sentence mine and break all that stuff up. I don't do that in my evening because I want to relax and practice what I know. So whenever someone's speaking, right, when they're speaking on a podcast or something, I'm interacting with the podcast. I want to know what they're trying to tell me, not what they're saying word for word. So when you're having a conversation, when I have a conversation with someone, I'm thinking about what their motivations are, what they're trying to tell me, like reading the subtext. So that's kind of what I'm doing in the off time. Like whenever I'm playing, which Phantom X is going to have an update in another 2 days, even though there's like English subtitles right on the game, I'm listening to the Japanese to see what they're trying to tell me, right, in Japanese, and then I look at the English subtitles to see if they captured what Japanese is trying to tell me. They're two different things. That happens really often during like playing Like a Dragon games in Chinese. When they say something in Chinese, it's giving me something, and then when I read the English, it's giving me something different. So I try to do that at the same time. And if it's the same language, I still do that. So when I watch a show that's in English and it has English subtitles, I still have English subtitles when I'm watching English. The thing is, sometimes the English subtitles is not a dialogue subtitle. It's a different way to express things. That doesn't happen all the time, but when it's in the same language, when I hear something, I want to confirm what it looks like in text. So it's not as dynamic. I like having different languages, like the subtitles being a different language from the hearing language, because I like comparing them. So that's kind of where I am right now. It's not to look for the subtitles to explain what they're saying. It's to interpret what they're saying in Japanese and put in my own words, and seeing if the English captures it the way I think they're saying it, which is it's inexplicable most of the time. Like, oh, okay, well, this person's really, surprised and stuff, and then the English would be like explanatory or something. That's kind of how my evenings are going at this point, and in how I'm experiencing video games. Like, it feels great, or it feels different. Maybe not so great. Maybe great isn't the most ideal word. It feels interesting. It's a different feeling now, where I can listen to Japanese and I know what they're trying to get at. And then when you read the English, I can't do the same thing anymore. Like, I would want to hear an English performance. Like, so I'm not entirely sure that's how people feel when they learn another target language and then they get to the point. I like hearing the performances. It's no longer the same where those who listen to dubs, right? They're like, okay, well, this is just English trying to be Japanese, or this is Japanese trying to be English, and it's just two voice casts trying to present their own separate things. They're no longer separate things. Like, when I hear the Japanese, I'm curious how the English is going to be performed. I understand the nuances of English. I'm starting to understand the nuances of Japanese, and it's interesting to compare and contrast them in a way that isn't a substitution. They're not substituting for each other. Like, oh, English is playing second fiddle to Japanese because it was originally in Japanese. That was rarely the case before. Now it's even rarer. It's even, I still can't associate with people who keep thinking that way. Like, they think one directionally, where it's really hard to sympathize with someone who says, oh, well, this language is better than this language. And like, how are you determining that? It's like, well, I like the way this language sounds. It's like, oh, okay, but do you know how the other language sounds? Like, well, I hear it more often than the other one. That's usually, at least in my opinion, the reason. They listen to one language with comprehension and they listen to another language without comprehension. I think that is more likely consistently explaining why they like a language than not. Like, when someone says, oh yeah, this language sounds so sophisticated, yeah, it sounds sophisticated because you don't understand the language. And then when you do understand the language, you behave like a snobby brat that thinks that you know everything about the native language, at least in my opinion, right? Like, slightly directly, because quite often when someone asks me like, oh, what do you think they mean by this English, right? You know, you watch a scene and someone's like, oh yeah, you know, they're just doing the same cliche thing by saying this, and I'm like, what do you think they're saying? So I would ask them, right? I would ask them, maybe some 19-year-old or 20-year-old. It's like, what do you think this person said this English, like, just did a soliloquy, right? Or a monologue in English. What do you think it means? What are they conveying? And when they talk about it, to me, for me and them to agree, I rarely agree with someone about what the intent was by the speech of it. And hear me out, take it with a grain of salt. That is why it's very difficult for me to recommend or share the stuff that I watch. Like, for example, No Country for Old Men. The dialogue in No Country for Old Men, the movie by the Coen brothers. Or something like Nosferatu, which is in English because the actors are English. And when they watch it and they listen to the English, I ask them, what do you think they mean by this dialogue? And to me, it sounds like the same way they approach learning Japanese, which is verbatim. So, like, they try to capture and mirror and mimicry, right? What the translation is. So, for my thought is, do you ever think about the nuance of the language? And sometimes, why is this all relevant? In my opinion, I like to think that when they really enjoy Japanese and they really dig into Japanese and, you know, move to Japan and become nuanced in the way of Japanese, it may promote them to reflect upon their English. Because in my opinion, one of the very notable disconnects that I have with the youth is treating English like a explicit tool as opposed to any sense of artistic capacity. It has no artistic capacity, as in there's no elegance in the way English diction is used when speaking in a movie like Nosferatu versus Frankenstein versus like a Shakespearean play. There's no like attention to detail. They watch like Shakespeare the way they watch reality television, which they watch like a English dub of a French movie. Like those they're all the same thing. It's the same process. There's no attention to the elegance of English. Like when you speak to them, for example, if you're wondering if it impacts them at all, or how can you tell, when they output their language in English, they would speak the same across everything. So like when they write English, it doesn't vary whether it's professional or informal, formal English. And then when they listen to like lyrics or poetry, or it's all treated the same way. It's typically treated when they output and explain this stuff, it's explained without an understanding of the nuance of English, which in Japanese you would have to understand that nuance right away, largely because, like, for example, I am unsure if when someone learns Japanese, like especially grammar, like sonkeigo and kenjogo and tenego, right? Are they attempting to internalize the nuances and imagine the situations, right? Like the actual, so going to Japan or living in Japan would give you those firsthand. Well, they don't participate in it in English either. So what are the chances that it will happen? Well, the nice thing about Japanese, I suppose, it's not really all that different, but maybe they go work in Japan and then they realize they need to change up the way they talk, right? Because they have to learn sonkeigo and kenjogo in a way for formal interaction. But those same people, those teenagers or like the 20-year-olds who moved to Japan, that might actually be their first experience being a professional. And then one day they're going to be those same people online that says, oh, Japanese, you have to worry about speaking two different ways because of professionalism. Like, yeah, you do that in English too. The downside, the problem is they weren't professionals in English. So what I mean is they didn't, during a lifetime, because of limited experience, in my opinion, they rarely had to talk formally in English. You spend all time online thinking that English, the only English you speak is impolite, direct, like casual English with tons of abbreviations and NetSpeak. Like NetSpeak is your predominant way of speaking. And I know for sure this is a fact most of the time, because whenever I read a high school or an early college essay, like their letter of introduction, right? Their cover letter or something for application, it is very difficult to read formally. Like it does not meet the standards of formal English. Now, you might be arguing, well, that's just American education, right? No, at least in my anecdotal speaking, internationally, I don't actually interact with American students most of the time, actually, due to the time zone. I rarely read American writing, like students that came from. It's usually like British most of the time, like a British related diction. So I learned quite a lot from reading like word choices and phrasing and whatnot. So it's interesting. Like there's actually a stigma as well. Like sonkeigo, I'm kind of curious if Japan, like the youth, right? Japanese youth also have that slight like jabbery snobbery about formal Japanese, right? Because I don't think that's different when it comes to the human condition, where you have a young culture, the youth culture, and they kind of throw a bit of hand waviness and jabbing at the need to be polite and formal and whatnot. And the reason why English, in my opinion, has such a stronger stigma is because oftentimes the default English is online English. It's not like you could make an argument like, oh, the highest representation of Japanese is Japanese NetSpeak. I actually don't know for sure, and I don't interact with Japanese. I like read Japanese chat sometimes on like the occasional stream or like on YouTube comments and whatnot, like that type of Japanese, and it doesn't strike me as incredibly different. However, that doesn't mean that I'm limited in my Sonkego and Enjogo, right? So I wouldn't be able to tell at the moment. In English, I can absolutely tell. People on NetSpeak, right? People on the internet you do not speak or write like that in a professional setting or formal setting or anything, in my opinion, that you have to put your name to as a reputation, right? Your reputation online. So it's interesting. Like I read someone's pose on describing their thought process behind their creative process, and it's like, well, I just take this and I do a lot of this and I look at this person because I really like this stuff, and this stuff's pretty neat, that stuff's pretty interesting, and it's like interesting over and over again. Like, so the thought is, I don't think your English have enough nuance to convey what it is you're trying to say. And then oftentimes it's a little bit paradoxical because the proses that they use, like the stuff that they write, was about how they have problems expressing their feelings or their artwork in art. And my first thought is, yeah, language is an art too, so it speaks for itself. So that's kind of like the paradox or the irony here. Like, the difficulty in expressing in the language they're using, usually English, is also reflected in the difficulty that you're trying to express in art, or like, you know, like practical art or digital art. And it transfers quite remarkably. Like, sometimes it's hard to know if they're being serious or not, or they're trying to be overly pedantic or overly poetic, but it comes off as incredibly limited. Like, trying to be expressive with their English comes off as, that's fire. I'm like, okay, I guess. I mean, I don't know what the future of English is going to be, but that's fire. It shouldn't, in my opinion, be the only way to be expressive about your hype, about your enthusiasm. You know, there would be words like, we can throw a couple words: enthusiasm, euphoric, excitement, invigorating, vigorous, ecstatic. There's quite a lot of depth to English that does not tract with someone who says, oh yeah, you know, I'm learning Japanese because some people say like, oh, English is just boring because I already know everything about English. And then there was like, I'm learning another language because I'm really good at English, so, you know, like, this will transfer to the understanding of another target language. My first thought is, can you demonstrate that to me, please? Like, I would love to see a demonstration of the command of your native language. If your native language has that command and enthusiasm, I would say, yes, it's a very logical and reasonable conclusion that your enthusiasm about the target language would reflect, if not exceed, your enthusiasm with your native language. Otherwise, my hope, or actually my expectation, would be that the investigation into a target language would retroactively rekindle perhaps or spark the initial enthusiasm for their native language, or a language that they are more fluent in, I suppose. There's a couple times where someone said something like, oh, you're very fluent, like I know 4 languages, so I'm fluent in the first 3 and I'm learning a 4th. And I'm like, oh really? And it's like, what are those 3? And among that list, they would say like English, and I'm like, I don't get that impression. How would you get the impression that you are fluent and an expert in English? And that's a discussion that I have very regularly. Like, how do you know you have a high proficiency in English? When you go and learn a target language like Japanese and then go through the patterns again of standardized testing like JLPT, and then different other measures like someone shared with me, Drama shared with me, like the EDU, right? The EDU, I'm just gonna call it EDU, or EJU, like some optional other ways. The immediate thought is, man, if I'm doing that, it would be interesting, self-reflecting, where my English is. And for me, this has been a wild trip down memory lane. Like, and anytime I'm reading a grammar, it reminds me of how much time, like hundreds, if not thousands of hours, more than thousands of hours, probably multiple thousands of hours, couple years of, we're not even talking about hours in this case, maybe years into English grammar. Like, I was enthralled by English grammar, and learning Japanese grammar is as enthralling as ever because I have an interest in English grammar. Now, people don't need to be interested in order to develop new interest. So hopefully, when the future, maybe, I'm not sure if language learning is on an uptrend or not. I don't really follow trends too much. My impression is that with the expansion of Japanese media, perhaps even Chinese media and Korean media, those 3 Asian languages will become more proliferative. And then that incentive also allows individuals to be reflective of lingua de franca, right? The English language, because I think English is, if you take the average, is well below average. I make this joke, sort of, because I don't have data for it. I actually believe that there's an ounce of truth, or even very truthful. The way hobbyists treat Japanese, like their target language, is rarely reflected in their deficiencies or their perceived competence, their heightened level perceived confidence of the command of the English language. I actually think, to some extent, by the time, everyone's like aiming for N3, N2, that Japanese attention to detail, that dedication and diligence already exceeds the maintenance of their typical English speaking pattern. And it's clear to me, at least, and I think my English is fairly above average. I wouldn't say like to the level of a master linguist or maybe even someone who's in pedagogics, right? However, I would say that my English would be somewhere around the full command of high school level English and some collegiate level English, which that is difficult for me to say because I still have apprehensions on the mastery of the basic grammar. Like when someone gives me a sentence and they give me a paragraph, am I able to construe and express and articulate the different parts of English? Well, if you don't do that very often, the answer is no. it doesn't matter how you feel or like how you think you feel. Feeling betrays the person's objective reasoning most of the time. So in English, I said this before, NetSpeak is like middle school to high school English. And then we go back to how Japanese hobbyists or dedicated Japanese learners, right, Japanese language learners, and they talk about how it's really easy to master N5, N4, and like, or it's really hard. They just keep arguing about all these things, and my first thought is, where is your English? Where do you think your English is? What is interesting about using your native language? Because your native language will reflect a lot of the habits you're going to impart on your target language. So if you're running around willy-nilly disobeying all of the English grammar and then willy-nilly not being able to subjectively code swap between different types of writing formats in English, you're going to have to do that in Japanese. So without those like output and habits in place, you have to develop those habits. And I think that is the root cause, or like the roots, not necessarily cause, but root sources of contributing frustration and detachment that eventually eats someone's enthusiasm. So like by the time you get to like an N3, right, in Japanese, your enthusiasm leaches, like the habits that are instilled by someone's native language, because they've already done it before, native language, they end up sapping all the motivation and like issues, because they have to develop the habits that they don't have already. They assume they have those habits. Like someone assumes they understand the concept and motivation of grammar because they assume they know the grammar of their native language. I'm not confident I know the grammar of my native language. I'm fairly confident I'm enthusiastic about it, though. Others don't even talk about grammar. Like, when they say they know the grammar, like, oh, I'm fluent in English. And then they imply that they also know the English grammar. I'm like, okay, so let's go and read one of your sentences or one of your paragraphs that you've written for your cover letter. And then as we're going through it, it's like, why aren't you speaking in the grammatical terms of English if you know your English so well, right? Like, whenever I say something like, I think that conditional phrase is not quite describing the subject of this sentence, and this paragraph requires a transitional phrase so that you know that all the pronouns that you are using in the second paragraph is referring to the pronouns you have established in the above paragraph, right? Instead, I would get this and say, what do you mean transitional phrase? Like, what are the pronouns? Like, I don't understand what you mean by a conditional phrase. And I'm like, exactly. That's exactly what I mean. Like, you tell me you're fluent in English and you're snobby and complacent about understanding Japanese grammar and Japanese verb, but you can't even do it. In my opinion, you rarely be able to explain it and do it with your native language. So the idea is not to punish the person, to challenge the person, is to encourage the person to be interested in doing it all the time, or like trying to do it frequently. So if you can do it with English, like be incentivized and motivated to think about all the things you write already, right? Instilling that, it can transfer to Japanese as well, or to Chinese, and vice versa, right? I typically hope that their newer experience, the Japanese experience, will be like an aha moment. It's like, oh wait, I can do this with English too. So if I practice that skill, it is a skill to like look at the relationship of words and words and sounds and construction of different languages to each other. That's kind of the field of linguistics, right? I'm not a linguist. However, I do appreciate how linguistics help with orienting information, right? So grammar is that. If you don't like grammar already in your native language, fingers crossed that your motivation of enthusiasm for another culture that is alien to you, right, for the time being, provides the happy dollars, I would call it the happy dollars, the motivation to want to invest in grammar. If you're already encouraging yourself to do it with all the things you're currently doing, like the languages you have, if you like the grammar of your existing language, making mistakes in your existing language and then correcting it and learning from it, then it's rarely, in my opinion, an obstacle when you go towards a target language. I think it's incredibly dissonant. It's a really obvious cognitive dissonance between someone who says, oh yeah, learning Japanese, this is the easy way to learn Japanese. I learn Japanese this way. It's always this easy. I'm good at it. And then I'm like, okay, how did you learn English? And then it'd be like choppy, missing principles and all of that. It's like, your Japanese is probably that too. Like, at least the likelihood is the person is overreaching their competence. And for me, when someone links me like someone's hot take or hacks and shortcuts and like a special method things on cutting corners to learning Japanese and acquiring Japanese very quickly, or insert your target language, my first thought is, okay, what is their history with their native language? That's my first take. My first thing is like, okay, can I hear how well they do and how well they describe things in their native language? Because I want to know what is the foundation or the basis of how they're evaluating their proficiency or competence in their target language. If you start saying like, oh man, that's fire, like this is my hack and hack this, hack that, shortcut this, oh yeah, that's how I feel and whatnot, and then they go to Japanese and they're saying, oh yeah, they're different in Japanese, they're going to be really formal and they understand all those things. I would have skepticism. I'm not saying it's not possible. Like, you could be super formal and super polite and whatnot in a language because you did a personality shift, right? A deliberate personality shift in a language because you're imitating, you're faking it until you make it approach, which can very well be possible. And then you have those typical interviews, in my opinion, those typical interviews where, oh yeah, I'm just a lot more polite and something in this language, and they ascribe it to the language itself as opposed to the complete cultural understanding and the environment that they are in that creates that compartmentalization or that dissonance. No, you can most definitely be overly formal and polite in English, very much so as in Japanese and whatnot. It is the whole package, the cultural environment that you are in that creates that compartmentalization of personality. Personality is also part, like what the people see, other people think you see, is an output. So if the Japanese culture suddenly embraces Americanized culture, the language itself may reflect that too. So it's weird, this dialogue that I really thought would be kind of fun to test, it didn't happen, for sure. Like, I'm fairly confident. I always thought that, man, you always hear these people who have interviews like, oh yeah, when I speak Japanese, I somehow come off as suddenly overly polite and overly formal. It's like the environment, right? It's language is part of the picture, but it's the entire environment that you are in. Since my environment did not change, right? Like, I didn't suddenly live in Japan, or I didn't suddenly start a job in which I have to consistently consider the idea of being formal. It didn't change. Now, I habitually speak formally in strange, like in an intellectual environment already. So the way I speak online when I'm being explanatory is reflective of being in a formal environment. That is equivalent, that's analogous to Sonkeigo. So I still remember some of these instances where, like, drama is gonna be like my, like, I really appreciate his company. I remember hearing he said why, like doshite, right? Doshite versus naze, right? The reason why I remember naze and use naze far more than doshite in that one interaction maybe last year or like a couple months ago, and he kind of, the habitual nature of drama was to say, oh yeah, no one says naze, like that's like ancient or archaic or even too polite or something like that, or something. James did the same thing where, like, I would say something and say, oh yeah, no one says that, that's kind of old hat and overly polite. You want to say casual stuff. That's the same conversation I have in English. Like, when someone wants to hear me speak the way I typically speak, this would be far more closer than when I'm being pedantic and overly verbose and esoteric with my jargon while I'm explaining something. That is my natural state of English. I do not sit there and say, oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like it. All right. Neat. Oh yeah, that's fire. Oh, that's great. Oh, hype train. I don't even know how to do it naturally. Usually when I'm typing, it's a bit closer because I'm not like uttering those things. That's kind of my reflection here. Whenever I'm doing grammar, this is what I mean. Like, when I'm reading grammar, I feel at home. So if I'm thinking about pedanticness and the construct of things, that is my standardization. Being pedantic, being scrutinizing and technical, while also, long-winded would be the word I would use. Long-winded or verbose, that's natural state. Like, put the fries in the bag, not so much. That's net speak. That's the internet hustle culture. Speaking. So one day when I post like a 10-minute video of me explaining a lifelong lesson that I've accumulated over 30 years, then I would be closer to pretending to be something or being something, not necessarily pretending, but code swapping to cater to your typical environment. The internet is an environment. In fact, I would argue, due to algorithm-based pre-selection, like heavy pre-selection, much like the literal geographical space, like being in Japan, being in England, being like anywhere, much like that, there are virtual spaces now where it is figuratively a village everywhere on the internet. So those villages now create subsets of linguistic compartmentalization that is very real. Now, I don't track these environments. There is someone who makes it their whole career at this point on tracking virtual, like, sub communities and demonstrating that there are sub communities of English. So then when you interact with that community of sub English, which occasionally I do, like, walk into virtually, like figuratively walk in to like a particular community, and the diction and the language that they use, the English that they use, are highly specific. And they're highly specific in a way that demonstrates that there is a chance that if they stay in that highly specific thing, they might encounter a personality shift, right? A personality shift, or what looks like they are different in that environment. That's where I get to that whole talk about where someone says like, oh yeah, it must be neat. If you learn another language, your personality might change with it. It's like, yes and no. It would change with the environment in which you, in the process of learning a language, that environment shapes your personality, right? That includes the language. It's crazy how to think that when an interview, I watch a lot of interviews nowadays, like from different people, about a simple conception of you can be polite in one language when you're speaking one language, but you're unable, like you're less likely to be polite in another language you speak. And somehow it gives in my opinion, the misconception that it's the language itself solely, or predominantly the language itself, that somehow creates that personality shift in the person. I find that very quite disagreeable, because when you're impolite in English, you tend to be impolite in Japanese. It is the environment that created the enhancement or the encouragement to be polite in Japanese. So like whenever someone speaks who didn't go to Japan or didn't go to professional school in English or something like that, they still speak polite in Japanese. Like when they type and they like correct me and talk about things like, oh yeah, no one speaks like that. Only casual, like you should learn casual Japanese. It's the same mentality. It transfers. Yeah, like for when someone says like, oh, you wouldn't say that in English, would you? I would speak in formal English if it was appropriate. I don't typically use formal English when talking to someone who prefers to speak in casual English. That's the point here. So the assumption here is oftentimes when someone is impolite or like direct or casual in their native language, it does often translate to their motivations and forms of expression in Japanese. It is the whole environment change, incentives, negative reinforcement, and positive reinforcement that creates that personality shift that reflects where they live. So when someone moves to Japan and they are also learning Japanese, they are likely to see a very obvious personality shift. It is not the language itself per se. And to me, I think learning a language itself requires personal motivation in order to actually see a personality shift or a reflection or retroactive. Because if my testament is that if you're learning Sonkeigo, right, Kenjogo, and Tenego, and you're saying the language is capable of driving your shift in personality, that personality would then be transferable or likely be reflective in English as well, retroactively. That does not happen. At least it's not very obvious that it happens, because the human person can still choose whether to compartmentalize or not. So that whole personality shift thing, that idea, it's compartmentalization. And it creates a really weird double standard where someone would say, oh yeah, English speakers, they're really direct and they're typically really direct and casual and expressive, versus Japanese, which is like very reserved, shy, and polite. Like, both humans still speak both those languages. The idea is that the predominant environment is what shapes the appropriateness Like, if the internet was shaped differently, right? Like, if the internet was shaped as a formal platform for business and professionals, English would no longer be a casual thing, and the internet would be less popular. So if you're wondering, okay, well, that's not happening to Japanese. Yes, it is. It is happening to Japanese. Online, Japanese is becoming more and more casual, more and more loose. So with the adoption of Japanese, there is less and less incentive to emphasize formal Japanese, right? For every 10 foreigners that's trying to learn Japanese, 9 of them are saying, oh yeah, don't worry about Sonkeigo and Kenjogo. You're not living in Japan. Like online, you're trying to speak colloquial Japanese. You hear that all the time. And colloquial and casualness is loose and tolerable. So when Japanese becomes more popular online, this is what I'm interested in at the moment, because I want to see if Japanese and Chinese undergo the same net speak transformation just after having grown foreign adoption. And it's no longer going to be the idea of foreign adoption. It's more like the language is very popular. Like the English is very popular. So it embraces and it gravitates towards mediocrity. Not in a bad way. More people means there's a greater averaging effect in English. The reason why there's this double standard, or this like weird apples and oranges comparison, like, oh, English is unrefined, or it's less refined, it's less polite, it's more direct. Casual speech. Humans like to speak casual and be more tolerable when there are more people using it. So Japanese might undergo that in the future. When Japanese becomes more popular, there is natural inclination for the human condition to break down its stringentness. It will become more flexible. There will be more accents, more, right? Spanish is already there to a great extent, French as well. So that's kind of my reflection on doing these grammar things. These grammar things are great. They're still there. They're not going to disappear. All of these grammar things, whenever someone says like, oh yeah, Japanese is so technical and it has all these things. Yeah, English does too. The difference is you don't care about that in your natural environment. And in Japan, if you go to Japan, there's a high chance you will probably care about that. And for teenagers, it is often that when they decide to uproot their life or plan their life around going to Japan, that is the first time they're going to experience being a professional. Well, you can't possibly say that Japan's professionalism in formal speech doesn't exist in English if you haven't ever been a professional speaking in English, right? Like, I can't tell you how often, I've lost track of how often someone like speaks to me in English casually. So they make like debates and like trying to elicit a proper debate or an argument, and then they're incredibly loose with their English. Because if we are going to stay incredibly loose with your English, then we're not being technical about it. Again, it's the same occasional person that I speak to a lot. They try to be technical, and I'm like, well, that's being a little bit pedantic. But we can both mutually be pedantic, and then I would change the tone of my English. Then I would be scrutinizing their English, because when they say, oh yeah, this sucks, this is a bad example of something, it's like, okay, well, qualify bad. You're trying to be overly pedantic and technical to me, so use your English to be pedantic and appropriately technical, right? Bad is not a great word to be technical. I can break it down. I can make it feel laborious. Every time you say bad, you have to qualify it, because bad is a casual term that has very few qualifications. So when you say, I hate this thing because it's bad, okay, what do you mean by hate? What do you mean by bad? That is casual English being supported by intent to be technical about it, right? And that is the scrutiny that I often feel that someone says, do you want to learn Japanese properly? Do you want to learn Japanese appropriately? Be serious about it. And that is really hard, in my opinion, for a lot of people, because they think they already have the habits of being really serious about Japanese. Not the serious that I think that person is referring to. They often think, oh, I'll work hard. I'll just work really hard, right? I really am passionate about Japanese. I'll work hard and I'll magically become diligent and vigilant and enthusiastic about technicalities, pedanticness, and whatnot. I don't think that's true. There's a chance, unlikely chance, you would have to develop those skills to do so. And if you're willy-nilly already making generic and like obtuse, relative, loose comments in English, that at least tells me there's a high chance that this person don't have those skills yet. And hopefully, again, I want to end on this like digression or this conclusion of Bunpro with a positive thing. I hope that their investigation and their commitment with the seriousness of their motivations will enable them to develop the seriousness, as in the attentive diligence and thoroughness necessary to achieve that when learning Japanese or Chinese. And eventually that translates back to a reflection or retrospection on how over complacent they are with their native language. For the record, despite my interest or how enthusiastic I may seem, perhaps, about English, when someone asks me, would I be confident to demonstrate my mastery of English, my answer would be no, I would not be. Much like in Japanese, I would downplay deliberately to be conservative, because professional English is also conservative. Overselling is a professional integrity's nightmare. Like, if you oversell, that's amateurish, in my opinion. It is not being sort of politically and formally liable, I would say. Like, liable in like the accountability part of English. Like, I wouldn't say I'm a master of English. That is highly casual. That's a casual, possibly irresponsible, and also professionally dubious to go around saying, oh yeah, I'm an expert in this. Not so much. I would not I wouldn't use that. That is casual English. You can probably use that depending on your clientele. Like, if your clientele are laymen's, right? People who are not experts in your field. Like, you're a physicist and you're teaching high school students. Yeah, one of the ways you could say is that, oh, I'm an expert in physics. It's like, because relatively speaking, your audience wouldn't be able to, are unlikely to gauge what your expertise is. However, if you spend most of your time in a professional field and you're surrounded by colleagues arguably of equal or exceedingly esoteric, non-overlapping skills, the comfortness of using casual English goes down, at least in my opinion, or that person wouldn't necessarily be very successful in that. Like, if I go to a room of my peers, I wouldn't simply go out of my way and say, oh yeah, I've mastered this. Like, that's a crucifixion waiting to happen. And that is kind of how the internet feels most of the time. English is spoken as though the person who's speaking knows something the person they're talking to does not. And they are overtly, maybe unintentionally sometimes, sound overconfident despite constantly saying they have social anxiety and they're confused and they're not entirely sure what they're unsure about, right? So that type of English is a consistent miscommunication to me personally, not to other people. Like, I can imagine two people who share the same communication style in English would understand each other. Like, oh, hey, oh, I'm good at this game. And then the other person is like, oh, I know what you mean by you're good at this game. When I hear someone say, I'm good at Japanese, it makes me sound like, it makes me think like, hey, can you explain all these things that I am thinking about with the relations between English and Japanese to me? Because you're good at Japanese, right? And then the person would say, oh no, like I'm good at Japanese, but I don't really care about English. But that's not the same. That's not a command of a language in its aspect of being good, right? So those are the types of things that I typically have a bit of a issue with personally. When someone says they know a lot about something, it's rarely in a manner that is accountable. It's usually casual. Like, oh yeah, I do this every day. It's like, okay, so how did you do it yesterday? Like, well, I didn't do it yesterday. I do it most of the days. Like, but you said you do it every day. Right? Casual English. Casual English is filled with hand wavy, unaccountability. You're not, quote unquote, worried about what you say specifically. And in Japanese, when you hear like, oh, sonkego and enego, right, and kenjogo, when you're in a working environment, the thing that internalizes that to me, at least the thing that I really like about that, is I'm generally like that. I consistently worry, willingly worry, because it's habitual now. It's habitual worry about the words that I say. When I talk to other people, it doesn't sound like they care about what they say. Like, oh yeah, this game is garbage. Like, oh, okay. Can you tell me why it's garbage? And for all intents and purposes, I hope you know that this is being recorded. So in the future, if you happen to like video games and you cross paths with this other person, they'll know that you called their game garbage. And I hope that you understand that you take accountability for the words that you use, because it can reflect poorly on you professionally in the future. Granted, if you're going to continue playing a video game and you never want to be professional in video game development, then yeah, you can definitely express yourself in any possible way you want, alienating as many people as you want by being less formal about your English, right? That's kind of one of those things. Like, you think people don't get affected or be attentive to these things. In a professional field, you're held accountable at all times. I say this very deliberately because I am recording this, right? I am sharing all the things I say. And yesterday I was pretty direct about like Neverwinter and all of that. And I do stand by those words. I don't think it's reflected in the internet culture though. Nowadays, everyone thinks of content creation and streaming and stuff as a casual affair, right? A hobby. A hobby is an excuse to be laxed in a public eye. I'm not entirely sure if the world or society is going to adapt rapidly to this yet, but in my opinion, English is incredibly deficient in being polite and formal and agreeable. I think it's reflected in English's position in the environment that they're using, at least in my opinion. When I walk into like a conference, or soon I'm going to go to a convention, the language changes. The people who work behind the stand don't sound like the people who are attending the convention, because you still work in those environments. Like, trying to be polite at the expense of internalizing like problems, that's politeness. So it's interesting to see what will happen. I have a couple people I'm genuinely curious in another 2 or 3 years the conversations we'll have, largely because they're going to go into a culture, at least in my opinion. Again, I've never been to Japan. However, I feel internalized, like the way the deepest cuts of Japanese culture, like always obeying, like the things that are dealing with the professional setting, feels like something that is not something I have to learn. It's familiar. And the people I talk to who wants to integrate into that culture, they speak like Westerners, for lack of a more direct, a more specific term. But the way they interact with me is something that I feel familiar because I grew up in the United States. It's not familiar when I'm in the household or among my relatives or whatnot. I don't speak like that we don't banter like that as my relatives. You sit, you respond when you're spoken to. You try to be as considerate as possible. Your words are incredibly weighted, and you don't simply like break that formality a lot of times. So I look forward to when they acclimate and like go to Japan and join a university for the first time, and even in a foreign culture, to see if I can observe the behavioral changes. Then that would also mean that I would get, in my opinion, I may have the opportunity to speak and behave something more reflective of what I typically behave like when I'm at home. Like, I don't say like, oh yeah, that's bad, this is good. Like, how's your day? Like, I there's actually zero pleasantries. There's near zero pleasantries in my dialogue with my parents. So you don't say how's your day. You bring your ideas with you and you speak with them because there's an obligation. So like when I speak to my parents, the first thing would be like, oh, okay, so concerning this bill that we had, not hi, how are you? How was your day? No, it's more like, okay, so we had this bill that we need to get sorted for the following day, right? I'm translating, obviously, because that's how it would sound like in English. Like, oh, did you get the correspondent from the insurance company that needs to go out in 2 months? Can you check if the rate is proper? Also, can you check the IRA and the matriculation date on the... Like, that's the conversation if I was translating my conversations with my folks. We talk about bills, taxes, and all that stuff. That's our typical routine. And have I talked about these things online? How often have I talked about these things online in the last 7 years? Not even close. Like, maybe 10 times in 7 years. And that is typical conversation. It's a very typical conversation. Talk about bills, the news, politics, religion, or not really religion, but politics, like nationalities, wars. That's what I would typically talk in my environment. And then someone will say, well, now you're an adult. You're basically an unk, so that's why you talk about them. I talk about them when I was a kid, too. When I was 13, taxes, insurance, bills, college, like future college, budgeting. That's not to say that that's everyone else's experience. My experience was particularly adult oriented. Getting good grades, always about getting good grades, right? Fitting in, making sure you stay out of trouble, sleeping well, doing your homework all the time. Meanwhile, when I'm having a conversation with someone else, it's about having fun, hobbies, buying new video games, playing the next thing, complaining about how entitled they are, about not getting the PC part that they want from their parents, getting toys from their parents, getting allowances to buy things, complaining about how their food doesn't taste good because that's kind of what I mean. Not that it's bad or good, it's a cultural difference, right? It's a cultural difference. I actually do not ever recall if maybe I cried when I was a kid, but I don't think I've ever complained about anything my folks have ever given me or eaten or something. I don't remember the last time I've ever criticized what they provide for me. And you might be thinking, well, that's weird. So then you're never truthful to your parents. Like, well, I am truthful. It's not the same truthful though, right? Like an argument would be like, a language would be, oh, but you're not being expressive then. You're just saying that you're saying you're never expressing your disagreement with the food, and like how would your parents ever be incentivized to improve upon their food or know if you don't like something? And then the opposite would be very much like, this is what I mean by I've never been to Japan, but I think I can relate to Japanese. You don't complain about what your parents do for you. That's not part of the culture. And they're trying their best. That's the assumption you make. Yes, you maybe can try in a very indirect way, very subtly, to suggest like, hey, can we like eat something else or something? That's a possibility. The language required to do that is very different. It's not the same as, hey ma, this meatloaf sucks. Can you cook better? That's not the English that's not the translation or the English I would use if my parents spoke English. It would be like, hey, Mom, have you considered, like, I thought this would be a great idea. Maybe we should could we try like something with a little bit more salt in it and see what it's like see if we like it, like mutually enjoy it a little bit more. That type of thing is polite English. You're trying to desho, right? That's the polite English. You're using indirect English to help suggest an idea without overstepping your authority under your parents' household. That is English. That is how I sound if I were suggesting something to my parents. Not the same as casual English online when someone says, oh yeah, this sucks. You suck. Bye. Like, okay, well, I can definitely tell where you came from, right? Or like where your cultural background, your cultural norms are. When you can just straight up come up to a stranger and say you suck and then be proud of that and then leave before even hearing the response. That's the internet. Are Japanese people doing that? So, yes and no. And this is going to be a selection bias. The people that I spoke to, the Chinese people, the ones that claim that they're fluent in Chinese, the one that they claim that they're like native Japanese, they speak less formal to me than the Japanese I watch and see in formal content. So like when I'm watching a news report in Japan or like some Japanese scientist explaining something in a podcast, it is still different from the Japanese people that I meet. Like a 16-year-old Japanese person comes on and say, talking, that's not formal. Like, even in the Japanese they write, it's not formal. They don't use Sonkeigo or Kenjogo to me, even though it's pretty obvious that I'm the senior, right? Because I'm American as well. So the foreigner effect still holds. You still have casual Japanese and casual Chinese, despite being from China or from Japan online. That's kind of what I mean by the whole, like, when someone says, oh yeah, no one says naze, and I'm like, yeah, no one you know. Or oh yeah, no one uses those words. Like, people don't say that. It's like, people you know don't say that. The platform that you have don't say that. And actively encouraging it is the reason why it doesn't have that, right? So when I say, I usually say this patented phrase in English, man, that's a bold statement. That is a very bold statement. That's usually what I'm referring to. I wouldn't go as far as saying those bold statements, provided that I'm held professionally liable for my words. Like, man, this is the worst game I've ever seen. Like, okay. And then, 1 month later, it's like, oh, this is the new worst game I've ever played. Okay. The idea is, I kind of understand what they mean, sort of. I wouldn't necessarily use those words. And that person, whether they appreciate my insight or not, is the idea that it's difficult for me to be friends, professionally friends, with people like that, because they're going, one day, at least in my opinion, they are likely to get into trouble, or their inability to, their deficiency, in my opinion, if it gets them into trouble, their deficiency in the way they talk. Like, it's one of those fun little American idioms, like, do you speak to your mother like that? That situation. And it's funny because that's an Americanized idiom. However, it's so appropriate when someone is talking to me in this environment and they're saying they are interested in Japanese culture and in Chinese culture. It's like, why are you speaking to me like that? It would be very obvious that you don't speak to strangers like that, or you try not to, especially someone who is clearly older than you, right? So that type of mannerism might change in the future, or it might not change in the future. The internet could just take over, right? There's a chance the internet take over. I think Sonkeigo, right, Kenjogo is a great case study, especially Japanese formalities, is a great case study to see how powerful the internet is. I think already the casualizing of Japanese has already started happening. And it's of no offense. I'm not saying that when someone says, like, oh yeah, you're talking out of your butt despite being 20 years older than you, the person that is talking to me, and they're talking to me like I'm a child, right? Or they're talking like a child and treating me like a child. When speaking in English, it's of no offense because that's how people speak. Now, is it their responsibility to understand that there are formal ways to sound agreeable online? Not really. There's no need for that, right? There's not really an incentive for that. Same thing with Japanese. If you don't have an incentive to maintain those things, then learning those things, quote unquote, is a waste of time. And that has already started happening when people say, oh yeah, I don't get it. Why do video games always start with textbook Japanese? And emphasizing polite speech. Meanwhile, that's like an 18-year-old hoping to live in Japan and hopefully get a job in Japan to make ends meet. And the first thing they're going to do when they go to Japan is try to use their casual Japanese that they thought was more important than their polite Japanese that they're going to need to maintain their job. That's kind of my deep cut. When, like, for example, right now, whenever I meet another Japanese language learner, they would be in their teens or their early 20s. And they would keep telling me that, let's use casual Japanese to talk to each other. And I'm like, I would not do that. You and I are not friends. We are strangers online. We would talk in formal Japanese. You would treat me because it is respectful to talk to me in that if you want to internalize Japanese culture. Like, you don't go up to someone who are clearly double your age to say to them, hey, the right way to speak Japanese is to use casual Japanese and practice casual Japanese. Like, no, we don't. I'm your senior, right? So that's kind of my current like thought process here. Is like, I won't say that back because I understand that in online most people prefer casual. They want to sound casual. The question is, does that mean they understand Japanese culture? I would probably disagree. Using online, projecting online things while learning a target language doesn't mean you understand the country that you're gonna go. Because even for myself, who haven't been to Japan, I wouldn't talk to a stranger by saying, yo, you're garbage, man. Get good. No, I wouldn't say that. Not even online. Like, I rarely ever go up to someone, enter their domain, as in like their channel or their virtual space, and talk to them like I own the space. In English, my interactions, because I don't have like a popular cult following or I'm not viral, it means that I somehow have no influence. I have no intelligence. Like, it's pretty wild how crazy someone can say, oh, no one's listening to this guy. This guy must not be significant or have a big deal. It's like, well, I'm older than you. In Japan, if I'm older than you, you would still treat me with respect. And I'm a stranger. You would still treat me with respect even if I'm a stranger. So when you're learning Japanese and someone, one of those edgy kids as a foreigner would say something like, oh, no, I wouldn't waste my time learning Sonkeigo, right? Because all my friends are casual and I'm friends with everyone. It's like, you're friends with no one until you treat them with respect first. At least in my opinion, if you want to understand how Japanese works. Personally, like a face culture, respect first. Always respect first. Respect, politeness first. You spend hours, months, years to become casual with someone, right? That's kind of one of those things whenever someone watches anime or like I get a chance to talk to someone or watch anime with them, they would say things like, oh man, this is so dramatic. Like, look at these two. They still don't want to talk in casual with each other after knowing each other for like a year or two. It's like, that's no exaggeration. It's really not that big of an exaggeration. Like, I speak formally, very politely to people who I know for years. And if our environment and our relationship and interactions do not promote casual relationship, then it stays formal. I said this before where someone says like, oh no, you don't understand. You're speaking Japanese incorrectly. You're learning Japanese incorrectly. You keep learning Sonkeigo and Tenego over and over again. It's like, it could make other people feel really distant. It's like, yeah, that's kind of the point. Because I am distant from you. Like, you're projecting a culture that is friendly and direct, usually people are very distant for a very long time. So like, and then someone would say like, well, I talk to you like once a month for like the last year. Aren't we casual now? No, we aren't. That's the point. We're still strangers. It requires a whole cultural, relational ritual to become closer to someone. So when someone says like, oh yeah, I'm having trouble making friends, it takes too long, and then friends drift and whatnot. It's like, I get you. I empathize with that. Because friends don't come easily, at least in my opinion, in a base culture, personally for me. So whenever someone says like, oh yeah, we're friends now, right? We know each other really well. It's like, no, we don't. Very politely, we don't. I would love to get to know you better. Like, that is the goal. It takes years of dedication and good faith to be friends. It's not a competition, and it's not a speed run, because the cheaper the friendship, the cheaper it is, the less important it is. The easier it gets there, the cheaper and tenuous it is. And that, in my opinion, is a reflection of Japanese culture and Chinese culture. You do all in your power to tread incredibly carefully with all the words and interactions you have, because nearly unanimously it is incredibly important to do so. So when someone comes up and say like, dude, your face is ugly, and I'm like, good luck. Hopefully that person that you typed a comment on YouTube isn't going to be your future boss or somehow related to something in your future, because when you reflect upon that, that's what Japanese decorum and Chinese decorum try to avoid. You don't shame yourself before you even know you shamed yourself, right? So when you're a kid, you are trained to diligently be that way. I still grew up in the American education system, so I understand how it's carefree and encouraging to make children like do what they want, like explore. I get that. I think it's really awesome in Western culture, like in the United States, where kids like can run around and spoil. I would spoil my kid for sure. My hypothetical kid. I would definitely spoil my hypothetical kid, because I'm Americanized. I did not grow up with that. I grew up always minding my words, understanding that I can't. Maybe I'll end up becoming my parents. Who knows? But you don't talk to your parents like that. You also don't talk to someone older than you like that. You don't go online thinking it's okay to not figure out like, hey, this person is way older than me, so I could speak my mind using informal English. Right? Not a bad or a good thing. Something to keep in mind. Something that I talk about, and I'm talking during this segment is because it is relevant to understanding Japanese culture and how you're going to proceed in using Japanese if you move to Japan. I'm still projecting though. Again, I've never been to Japan. However, my diving into Japanese culture, like watching like older people talk to each other in like a business room, like a news meeting, a conference room, when they're talking to each other, that is the essence that I'm getting. Like, it feels at home. I feel like I could go into a business office and have a business conversation with Japanese people if I am able to produce the Japanese language, right? Because in my opinion, that's kind of what it's like to walk into a room of scientists and talk business, right? Or talk about the obligation stuff. There's a lot of politeness, formality. Hey, consistent etiquette to the room. That rarely exists, I think 99% of the time, in a student's environment now. Like anyone who's growing up through high school or even through college, their predominant environment for English is Discord, TeamSpeak, Dear Me, the Call of Duty chat channel, or 4chan, or like Reddit and X. Like, I know I said X, short Twitter, right? I get corrected a lot. Like, no one calls Twitter X, and I'm like, well, it's labeled X. So corporately speaking, right? Like when you're trying to be business oriented, the platform's called X, not Twitter anymore. So that's kind of one of those things when you do a jab, like, oh yeah, well, no one ever calls it that. Yeah, it's the same way as you rationalize your language. Like, yeah, no one uses polite speech online. Like, well, yeah, but not everyone shares the same opinion. Just the people you hang around share the same opinion. So, that's kind of one of those things. I think we'll probably visit this conversation quite often in the future because Japanese is really wonderful topic to visit the politeness and formality. It allows me to also talk about English formality, right? Being cognizant of not necessarily emotional intelligence. I think emotional intelligence often can get intermixed or conflict with professionalism, like formal English. Formal English tend to try to stray a little bit away from emotional intelligence. So something like, oh yeah, I feel ya. Or like, oh yeah, we're on the same page, bro. Like that's more like emotional intelligence that it requires. I think a business is more like it's trying to be as explicitly accountable as possible without creating vulnerabilities. So sometimes like it's the opposite of emotional intelligence, which is whenever you meet an internet person who is an internet expert who speaks from a lot of facts, that can be closer to, I guess, professional English sometimes when they're copy pasting or regurgitating that ChatGPT essay that they didn't write. That, in my opinion, is when you can tell someone is trying to sound objectively professional without internalizing the nuance of using polite English. Like when someone says something like, oh, the naturalistic way of linguistically adapting Japanese dogmatic behavior with the structure of Sonkeigo's usage is the following. And then suddenly I'm like, oh, can you explain that in a different way? And they're like, well, that's what I think this is the best way. That gives it away. Like the person basically regurgitated something that was professional and they can't speak professional or they can't type professional. So it's one of those like contradictions that gives away a person, where someone can type hyper aggressively professional, like very objectively sophisticated, and then the next thing that comes out of their mouth is inappropriately direct. Like comprehensible input, promoted by Stephen Krashen, is the foundation of the new age modernization of SRS technology implemented in very socially acceptable and trending linguistic learning models online. And then the next thing they said was, Anki is the best. The first part probably lifted from ChatGPT or some form of formal writing. And then the second part shows that they've never been in a professional, or they are unlikely to have been in a professional setting ever, because you don't speak like that suddenly having spilled all of that objective information. So that is a point of imitation, in my opinion, not a point of comprehension. It gives it away because there's a sudden tone shift in English. You went from formal English straight down to pretty much asinine English, because you would be foolish to say that immediately after trying to sound like you've done a dissertation on like some conceptual and hypothetical understanding of secondary language acquisition, when trying to advertise and promote casually what you think is not even conceivably true or nearly highly improbable to prove that Anki is the best. So that is reading something without the experience of speaking that way, which happens far more often in online English, NetSpeak, where someone would regale me in an extensive, highly technically phrased descriptor of a very specific concept, and then proceed to speak in language that is no longer that specific and nuanced. To me, that's like learning a language, mirroring it and memorizing it over and over again, reproducing it without comprehending the motivation, the nuance of its application and appropriateness, the culture of it, and hoping to intuit it in the future. So ChatGPT has done, in my opinion, one of the greater dissonance. It has promoted this dissonance. Whether it's appropriate or socially acceptable to me, that's kind of irrelevant, because I would say conservatively I'm a minority. I prefer, if I were to be asked what are my preferences, I would prefer that there would be at least an element of paraphrasing, or an ability to show the limits or the current extent of their comprehension of what they're reading. Generally speaking, though, on the internet, most of the time, whenever it comes to something that requires a deep dive or a professional level of understanding or an expertise, it rarely comes off as that. It typically is a regurgitation of someone else's expertise, a failure or an inability to paraphrase it to the level of their comprehension, and then they would simply spout out an opinionative conclusion that have no nuance of the process or the value, the time that it took to come up with that conclusion. Like the importance of the conceptual understanding of what is comprehensibility and how to measure comprehensibility, the pros and cons and extents and limitations, right? Or maybe the upper limit and lower limit problems of self-evaluating one's own comprehension in order to apply a concept like comprehensible input to ascertaining how that is important in apps, or like in the app of their choice, right? In whatever app they chose. Like MAKU, for example. Like someone say that, oh, CI is the reason why MAKU works. Explain. And then they would explain conceptually what CI is in a fairly highly technical way, and like that doesn't explain it. I said explain how CI makes MAKU work. That's an English problem, at least in my opinion. It is an English comprehension problem, because I'm asking you to explain how the concept of comprehensible input is related to MAKU's success, not what comprehensible input is. That does not explain what I asked. You explained what CI is. That, to me, is a symptom of ChatGPT. ChatGPT and your AI language models, that is the current state of things. And I'm not sure if it's going to change in the future. Reading a lot of things that are summarized to you does not enhance comprehension.
it doesn't create comprehension. It typically, in my opinion, all right, maybe 80-20, 80-20. 20% of the time, it may lead to comprehension. 80% of the time is mimicry and memorization, where someone would understand separate facts. However, they're not incentivized to connect them or to relate them to its meaning. So oftentimes I get into conversations where someone's like, oh, yeah, this is using syllogistic logic. And I'm like, oh, how so? Can you explain to me what your interpretation is in which I'm using syllogism? And then someone's like, well, all right, syllogism is, they start defining what syllogism is. And I'm like, I didn't ask that. You're not demonstrating more understanding by describing and dictating what the definition of a word is. And it happens very often, not even with complex, like obtuse, grammatical terms or like linguistic terms. It often happens when someone is trying to be pedantic without understanding the motivations and connections of the question in mind. Like, so, I would say, oh, yeah, like, so what does JLPT measure, right? What are the metrics in which JLPT can measure? And then it would immediately go to, okay, so JLPT stands for this. It is a test administered based on this. And then I'm like, yes, but how does that connect with your proficiency? Like, how are you interpreting all of these details with the proficiency, your display proficiency, and your reasoning behind your feelings, behind how well you're doing? And they would say, well, JLPT then tests verbs, like they have an oral section and writes. I know, you're still describing the exam, right? You're still just simply describing and regurgitating the exam. It's not answering the question. The question concisely is talking about the stuff that is related to your feelings of how, like, it's typically someone who says like, oh, I'm upset. I failed the N3 for the 4th time. And I would ask something like, the 4th time? What were the related problems that you found, or potential persisting problems from the 1st time, 2nd time, 3rd time, and into your 4th time? Like, what have you gleaned with the relationship between the things you can measure and observe? And that would be an overloaded question. It would typically result in the person saying, well, I don't know. I guess I need more vocabulary. But that didn't explain anything. It was stating a descriptor of the obvious, right? Like, if JLPT measures vocabulary, listening skills, and grammar, and you simply stated what JLPT measures, it doesn't tell you the relationship of your problem. There's no comprehension to why there's grammar, vocabulary, listening, and like, there's no comprehension, right? It's like telling someone, coming up to someone like me and say, hey, you shouldn't waste time learning Sonkeigo. You should, or Teinego, you should spend most time learning casual Japanese, because it's normal for people to speak in casual Japanese. That is saying something without comprehension of the context, which is ironic because most of the time the people who tell me those things would constantly tell me how great Japanese is because it's contextual, and English is not contextual. I'm like, English is not contextual to you, maybe, because you only speak in one mood and speak in one diction in English. So if you only speak in one voice in English, there can only be one interpretation, right? And that's kind of the thing that I think about each and every day, honestly. I genuinely do not divorce myself from that whenever I'm learning Japanese. It's consistent. And it's not because it's hard and it's laborious, largely because I do it in English. Like when someone asks me a question in Discord, I ascertain what type of voice I'm going to speak to them in English, largely because I want to be as respectful and polite. I usually don't pick the bottom line, like, hey, if I can speak casual, I'm going to speak casual. I more like aim the middle. Like I want to be slightly polite and occasionally dip down to the most casual way I can speak. That's my mix of Asian, I guess, like Chinese upbringing and English. I would aim in the middle. I would aim where I'm still polite enough in case I'm not polite. Not go as casual as I can by pushing the envelope. Like, yeah, you know, I hate this game too. It's like, I wouldn't say that. Like, that would literally what I would say. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you feel that you hate the game, right? I'm sorry you feel that way. I don't particularly share the same sentiments. That's probably what I would say, typically. I would try to be agreeable, like, oh, I can see where you're coming from. However, I'm sorry, but I don't I don't feel that as strongly as you do. That's kind of what it's like to use formal English, or polite English. It's actually the tenego of, that's how English is. The other way is to get even formal, like sonkego and so on. This is where I talked about this structure before, and the last time James kind of like popped in and made like a comment about like formal speech. This is where I would say being polite, tenego, is using probability, right? Straying away from certainty, tenego, right? Being polite. So I'm sorry you feel that way. There's a chance I may not feel as strongly as you do. However, I can appreciate what you might be feeling, what you may be feeling. Tenego. And then sonkego is, we may want to try to be respectful to the developer. If someone's product has been used for they have developed it for a very long time, I don't think we may want to refrain from trivializing their efforts by directly and explosively using extreme decorative vocabulary or expression of opinions, right? That would then elevate its ability. So your diction is starting to change to accommodate being respectful to the people you're talking to or talking about. That's sonkego. Then kenjogo would be what I would typically do when I'm making a statement about my own anecdotes. Like, for example, okay, I've never been to Japan, right? I've never been to Japan, so take this with a grain of salt. I'm trying to project, I'm projecting a little bit, but if you were to humor me, kenjogo, you're humbling yourself. So in English, you can do that with diction. You're doing that with mood and diction. Sonkego, you're trying to pay respects to people's feelings. So I can understand that you're really upset right now, but let's try to be a little bit more reasonable and take into consideration that the developers probably also tried their best to make this an enjoyable experience. So let's try to find something That's sonkego. You're trying to be respectful to the people that you're talking about, including the person you're talking to, right? That rarely gets used in English unless someone is suffering. So whenever you go into mental awareness stuff, Like you go to a forum and someone's very distraught. They're depressed. They're feeling anxious, worried. Sonkeigo can happen in English, where someone's like, "Oh, don't worry about it. Like, I'm sure you tried your best. Let's try to focus on the things that we can do better," right? That is like there's a condolence situation. That's probably the closest that English get to use next to Sonkeigo. They're trying to create respect or trying to help that person gain respect for their actions by speaking like, "Yeah, I bet you, no, don't worry about it. Just keep on trying. You're trying very hard. Don't forget that you put in a lot of time." That's trying to be respectful in a condolence way, right? That's probably the most common form of English mood to express condolence for someone in a sucky position. And then for Kenjogo, that is so rare. It's incredibly rare. It's often inferred even. It's so inferred that it's rarely spoken using Kenjogo in English. Like for example, "Oh, pardon me. I might be, there's a chance I might be overstepping, but may I get a bit of your time in order to suggest something that may not be necessarily agreeable, that you might not necessarily find agreeable." I use that. I speak in English whenever I have to suggest something to someone. I would combine Sonkeigo and Kenjogo in English. Like, "Hey, I know how you feel. Like, it's really tough. It's a really tough time, and you've been working really hard. I'm sure your boss is also trying very hard to understand you. But may I have a suggestion? I know I don't work in your environment, and I definitely do not have a professional background that you guys may have, and obviously I'm not one of your personal coworkers. Perhaps this may be the following." That is how you internalize, in my opinion. That's the idea of internalizing the speech. And tenego is polite speech, right? You're simply trying to be polite. So like, "Oh, I see. I don't. I might have a hard time understanding, but I get where you're coming from." Or, "Oh, that sounds like a very reasonable. That sounds like a reasonable remark. Okay, that sounds amazing." Or like that sounds very interesting. Those are like the polite speech. Like when someone says like, "Oh yeah, I'm having the best time of my life," and I'm like, "I'm really happy for you. I hope you continue to have the best time of your life." Polite speech, right? And a bit of sonkeigo, because you're highlighting the person's sharing. You're not expressing anything of yourself, so you're not like occupying, you're not putting the spotlight on yourself. Where the alternative in English would be indicative. It's the selfish, narcissistic English, which is something like, sometimes trying to empathize, but not quite in the same way, like explicitly in the same way. Someone would say something like, "Oh man, Japanese, this Japanese grammar, it really sucks," and the other person's like, "Yeah, I know, it sucks, right?" That's an attempt to empathize. However, you're not paying respect to the person who's sharing. You're skipping over a step, right? The step you're skipping over is sonkeigo. You're not respecting what they said. You're not acknowledging that they said it. You skipped over the step to infer that you heard what they said by sharing your own opinion that is the same as theirs. So you're agreeing with them, right? You're doing the agreement. However, you now have created a spotlight on yourself. So that's kind of the separation. You can do all in English. I feel like it's a little bit murky, where a lot of the contexts aren't like deliberately separated. So typically when I'm speaking to a stranger, when a stranger shares something with me, sonkeego first, mixed with a bit of tenego. Like some of my sentences are polite, they end politely, they're acknowledge, and then a lot of it is acknowledging the person's problem, asking the person for more information. And then whenever I express my own opinion, I'm still talking to a stranger, right? Most of the people online are strangers. I would speak by humbling myself immediately. So, and I sound like a broken record a lot of times when I say in my opinion, or I'm not an expert in linguistics. I'm not a professional in psychology. I no longer work in science. All of those things are required to speak to strangers. And I do that habitually. So when I'm learning Japanese, it's arguably, debatably, again, I'm modest intermediate Japanese language learner at this point. I can no longer comfortably potentially negligent to say I'm a beginner Japanese language learner. However, with that all in mind, I'm executing the very thing that I'm saying. I'm humbling myself in order to make a statement, because I don't know what this stranger knows, and only the most intimate and casual people I know, who I spend a lot of time with or a lot of detail, would I ever go beyond not being polite. Minimally polite. Minimally technical. Like, technical is the default in English. I don't go around and say like, suck it up, dude. Yeah, you're lying. Can you quit it, please? You know, yamero. Like, I would not do that. There are times, though, they do exist. Rarely. I would say 5% of the time, I'm rarely talking to someone who's like, oh, just give it to me straight. I still won't, it would still be tough for me to give, like, when someone says, like, oh, yeah, just lean on me. Like, just give me it straight. And I'm like, okay, I'll try my best. Right? I'll try my best. Try my best. Right? Ni miru. Right? Miru. Try my best. And it would be like more like, you know, mimasu, not miru. That kind of thing. So, another good topic for another time to revisit. Anyways, that's a wrap for Bunpro today. Grammar, Japanese grammar. What a wonderful way to go on a tangent or a monologue about English, right? And if you're gonna watch this later, arigatou gozaimasu, right? As always, feel free to follow along, pick up Bunpro for yourself, give it a go. You're more than welcome to come on by and yap and share and tell me about your point of views. What has learning Japanese grammar help you thought about in your native language? Because for me, it's far more easier and personable when I think about all the things I speak about and talk about in English when I'm learning Japanese grammar. Because then when I am learning Japanese grammar and whatnot, all of that stuff is incredibly memorable. All of this sonkeigo, how to say consider to different degrees, how to say if, like 6 different ways, all of that is important to me in English. It might not sound like if is different anytime. It is. English is incredibly nuanced too. The difference here is that the people who use English no longer think it's interesting, in my opinion, to think that way. They like to stick to being a native speaker. The native speaker is native to their environment. So if your native environment is never stepping into a corporate office, then you have no native experience with that environment, right? Very much so when someone tells me that they do research and they know a lot about science and they talk to me like they've never stepped into a laboratory before and they've never stepped into an office meeting with other colleagues in the scientific field. It's very obvious, not bad or good. Sonkeigo, Enjogo is a great life lesson on how to sound polite without sounding arrogant, and always consistently a work of art. Its communication is an art form. So trying to constantly balance between overstepping, overreaching, while being humbling and respectful is somewhat of an lost art form on the internet. So I'm curious what how other people approaches this conundrum. For myself, the only way I see getting better, quote unquote, bettering myself at these things is to consistently work on it. And learning Japanese is certainly giving me an opportunity to reflect upon that. You're more than welcome. Until next time, 皆さん、またね, I suppose. 見てくれてありがとう. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. I'm gonna get up, take a quick bathroom break, and I'll be back for Hanzahiro. Thank you very much.